Hello, friends. How are we doing? Look, my camera just went out on me literally as I was starting. But hello, welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. Man, I'm glad that we're back tonight for our last installment of our series called Family Ish. So, if you've been following us for the last 3 weeks, we have been talking about how our family of origin impacts us in several ways. And so, week one, we talked about how family of origin impacts our identity, how family of origin impacts on week two our sense of calling and purpose. And then last week, we talked about how our family of origin impacts our relationships. And so tonight, man, we're going to be in for a treat. We're going to have a great conversation. But before I do that, again, as you're coming on in, let me know where you're chiming in from. My name, if this is your first time, my name is James Perkins. I am a therapist and a coach here in the state of North Carolina. And I love Bojangles. I love people. I love stories. I love people supporting people where they're at in their journey. And so this is really how this was kind of birthed, if you will. During the pandemic, I wanted to create a space where we could kind of process different aspects of things related to our emotional health. So I am looking forward to tonight's conversation, because tonight we're going to have a conversation around conversations, but with some specific people that we call our primary caregivers or our parents. And I have a great guest on tonight with me that is going to have this discussion with me, and I will bring her on shortly. I want to make sure everything is like popping and all the channels, and that I can see everybody's comments before I start, because I want to make sure I get to any questions or comments that people may have on tonight. Okay, man. I think we're almost ready. Again, if you're coming in for the very first time and this is your first time, man, let me know in the chat by just putting a 1. Or if this is your second time, hit a number 2. Or if you've been here with me like over several weeks, you can just put like OG. All right. So again, man, I'm glad that you guys are here with me. Glad to have this conversation. Tonight I have a special guest on with me. She's a clinical psychologist. Her name is Dr. Cheyenne Dye, and great friend, great colleague. I love her, respect her in the highest form, and that's no exaggeration. I lean on her for a lot of support, insight, clinical expertise, and you'll see some of why on tonight just from the feedback that she gives. So I'm excited to have this conversation. I think it's really important. And without me talking any further, let me bring her on. Bring her on with me. There we go, Dr. Shy. How are we doing?
Hey, friend. I'm good.
What's
How are
going on?
you?
I am well, man. I
On Wellness
literally got
Wednesday, you're well.
I am well on Wellness Wednesdays. Like I said, I just literally got back maybe an hour before this starts from Gatlinburg. We took a family trip. My son is tracked out, and it was fun. It was really great. Had a really good experience, but I was really excited to get back. I had pondered about, man, should I just pre-record this since I'm going to be on vacation? I was like, no, I think I want to do this live. And I was looking forward to this conversation with you for several different reasons. One, I think it's an important conversation that we don't often have enough, in part because of a whole bunch of different reasons that we'll get into. And I wanted to like help give people some guidance and like a framework, because I think there are people on who see the benefit of having conversations, but may not have the language accessible to help
Yeah.
initiate some of those. And then there's some people who are like on the other side where they're like, why should I even have the conversation? I'm like, I'm an adult now. And so
Right.
hopefully better speak to both of those aspects. But I'm glad you're on. You can introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then we'll get going.
I thought about everything but that. I'd be freaking I have to
I
introduce
know,
myself.
right?
The introvert in me just freaked out. Um,
You
so,
can
like you
tell
mentioned,
us
Diane,
your name, your date of birth, your last four of your social, where you're
right?
from,
So,
right? Anything that you think will
oh,
be pertinent
look,
for us tonight.
I'm from Jersey. Okay, so Jersey might come out depending on what we're talking
I
about.
love it. That's why I
Um,
brought you on. Okay.
look, I'm a clinical psychologist, like you mentioned. My husband's going to get you because I officially did change my last name.
Oh, I hope he's not on live tonight.
No,
OMG.
no. So it is Dr. Williams, but
Dr.
listen, I've
Williams.
been Shy for so much a part of my life, so it's all the same. It's me. Trust me, with my name, it's me.
I love you, bro,
And,
if you listen to this.
and look, I was like, oh, we're talking about things we love. He's like, I love Bojangles. Well, look, I love hoodies. Okay, I'm a
Yes.
therapist in a hoodie. If I could live in them
Yes.
all the time, I would. Hoodie season, even in the summer, just for short
Right.
hoodies. So, okay.
You're dedicated.
those,
You are
those are some
dedicated.
those are some of the most three important things about me. I'm from Jersey. I'm an introvert. I love hoodies. That's all you need to know.
Those are essential. Like those are the most consistent things that I know about you. Are those three things? So I know
It's true.
you.
It's
No
true.
cap. I know you keep it at 100 with me tonight. Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
So shall we ramble on about a whole bunch of different stuff in our
Yeah.
world
We have good
and
conversations, and I'm glad we're
less.
getting to put a camera on it finally.
Right. Like, cause we have these conversations normally over the phone, on a couch,
Hmm.
in a Zoom session. We schedule time to meet for something specific and we do that.
Yep.
And then eventually it ends up into
Oh,
something related to the
that's
emotional
right.
health. And
All the time. Because we're
all the
still figuring
time,
these things out and processing them
there we are.
individually for the people we work with. So it's a continual process
Yes.
for a lot of us. And it often happens in parallel with the people we work with. So I mean it's on our mind.
So this is a good point, right? Because I think in part, what you just said is like completely accurate that even as we hold space for people, helping them process the things that we're talking about, especially as it relates to childhood experience, there's some
Right.
learning, some insights that we get about our own stories that we're like connecting, like, oh, okay, I think I see this in a new light based off a
Absolutely.
conversation we might be having with a client. And then with us both being believers, it's one thing that's unique. I'm trying to fix my camera. There we go. I don't know what's going on. About that, and we've had this conversation around it's a scripture passage in the Bible in Ephesians where it talks about children obeying your parents, for this is right in the Lord, and it talks about honoring your parents so that your days may be long with you. And a lot
Yeah.
of Christians interpret honoring parents as not sharing anything negative about their childhood experience with them, or they see it as a dig, especially if they feel like they had good parents to share aspects about their relationship with them. And I see a huge majority of Christians in my office who struggle to even feel like it's okay to articulate that. And I see the impact of that. And I'm like, hey man, you can't keep this down. You gotta talk about this. And especially for the ones who have somewhat of a good talking relationship with their parents. I realize that sometimes there are dynamics where sorry you guys, where you don't have contact with the parents, so you can't have the conversation.
Yeah.
But for the most people that I
Yeah.
see, they have some type of access and connection with them. And so the first question I just really want to ask is, should we even have these conversations, right?
Right.
If we are adults and they can't go back and reparent us, isn't even like, should we even have the conversation if they can't repeat it? if they can't go back and be like, you know what, I'll put you back in my womb. We're gonna rebirth you out and have this whole new experience with you, right? Should we even have these conversations? This is the first question I want to start with tonight.
And I'm gonna give you one of my favorite answers. It depends. Because I know in lots of these conversations, there's hardly ever one size fits all, right? There are so many nuances, so many factors to take into consideration. So, and we're going to get to some of those, but it really does depend, right? What I believe in always, and we've talked about this, is open, honest communication. I'm always going to stand on that hill, no matter what.
Yeah.
But what I also know, saying that, is not everyone has the capacity to have those or the capabilities to have those. Yeah. Again, for different reasons. So I think when done well, right, these conversations can allow people to have healing. It can bring people closer. It can give you understanding. It can even broaden your perspective about your parents, right? In terms of understanding why they may have made decisions they did that you just weren't aware of. But also on the other side, it could leave you more confused. It could give you access to information that you may not even have been ready to handle or ready to know about.
That's good.
Or it could create even more tension. Right. So I think this is why it's good to have the conversation we're having, to take into consideration all these things to think about that people may not realize. And I think the time that we are in now, people are becoming, well, to some degree, I hope, more self-aware, right?
Yes.
More people are open to therapy. I think in the younger generation, they're talking more openly about their feelings and their thoughts. And I think this is why these conversations are becoming more to the open space. But there still could be that generational gap, because that's, our generation, a little lower. Those above us may not be ready or have that same ability, and our parents, grandparents fall into those generations, right? And so it can make these conversations challenging depending on how receptive they are, how open they are, how ready they are, how able. Like, communication at its foundation, it's a skill, and all of us have varying degrees that can make it challenging.
So you said three things there that I want to highlight that I think are really important, and I'm gonna work my way back to them. One is that communication is a skill, and it's not a skill that we come with. It's not a skill that's acquired at birth. It's something that we develop, right? Yep. And how would you say just even that skill of communication impacts that dynamic or that conversation that we may have with the parent?
So, and I'll say this openly, right? I've never shied away from this. One of the reasons, no, not even one of, the main reason I became a therapist is because I grew up in a lot of what I would consider dysfunctional relationship patterns, behaviors, decisions. And it wasn't modeled for me. Other ways weren't modeled. So I didn't come equipped with good communication skills, good emotion regulation skills, conflict resolution. Like, I didn't have that. It wasn't shown to me. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was like, well, I want to be different than what I saw, but I don't know how. Like, where's that information going to come from? So that was one thing that drew me to psychology and wanting to be a therapist. I'm like, well, if I don't know, I'm sure there are other people don't as well. And I want to give people what I didn't necessarily have. So yeah, and some of that came from just kind of natural observation. When I got out of that environment I was raised in, seeing like, oh wait, other people do this differently. So being curious, being observant, help. No, for real. I'm like, wait, it was so odd to me when I got to college. My roommate like talked to her parents every day. I did not. I was like, that's a thing.
What?
I love my parents. They're great parents. They weren't the best partners to each other from my perspective. And so it was somewhat of a relief to get out of that environment for a while. And I'm like, I enjoyed the break. So I didn't want to keep going back to that every day, but
Yeah,
for me, that was normal.
man.
um, so yeah, so
Yeah.
these things are, it's good. You can learn them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're taught some level of skills, not always the best, but we got to start somewhere.
We
Um,
do, man. So I think what you said, we have to start somewhere, and I think sometimes we overlook that everybody has a starting place,
yeah.
and while you may look at somebody else who may look like they're more skilled in their communication, I'm pretty sure that they had a starting place for themselves. That it wasn't something again that they acquired.
Mhm.
Um, I think you said something that I think was key, and I want to highlight it as well
Mhm.
with the other 2 points that I still have to highlight. That I think for some people it is even a learning that you just observed that your parents were good, um, were good parents, but they were not great partners for each other.
Mhm.
Some kids
Mhm.
don't even get that, grow up with that awareness, or at least are not able to reflect and come to that conclusion until adulthood that, man, I had good parents, but they weren't good for each other. Um,
No.
and yeah, talk with me about that because sometimes, like you said, we kids, adults can interpret and see their parenting. They can see all of what they've experienced with their childhood through the lens of um, my parents were mad at me, fill in the blank. Not that, man, a part of the parenting experience you may have got was in consequence because they were not good partners for each other and they took that out
Yeah.
on you.
Right. So a lot of this kind of came once I left the environment, and
Mm-hmm.
then started kind of, because I left at 17 when I went to college,
Right.
and I started seeing other examples, talking to other people who had just different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Because on paper, for example, I came from a middle class two parent home. You'd think we should be happy.
Right.
Um, but while my parents were very loving as parents to me and my brother, as as we were their children, there
Mm-hmm.
was less of that love displayed between them.
Mm.
They operated in their roles as
Mm-hmm.
husband, wife, or whatever. So they had the emotional capacity for us, but there was something getting in the way for them to have it with each other. And that was just significant for me. Because yeah, I mean, it's normal to me
Yeah.
because I'm in the house,
Right.
and then you get the idea that, oh, well, before I go on that
Mm-hmm.
tangent, let me say it this way. I haven't had these conversations with my parents directly, right? So my father actually
Right.
passed away when I was 22, so I never had the chance to have the conversation with him.
Mm-hmm.
When Before he passed and I was a little older, we may have had some kind of conversations about their relationship, but nothing deep, or because I'm still
Mm-hmm.
relatively young. Um, and I've talked about it in indirect ways. So my mom
Right.
is aware that I have some of these thoughts, but I think it surprised her when she initially heard them because she's never heard me express them out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Directly. Yep.
yeah, and I think it was hard for her to hear that and kind of, because
Yeah.
my honest take from it is I believe my mom and my parents did the best they knew how,
Mm-hmm.
and parents can do that, but yet still fall short of what
Yeah.
the child feels like they may
They
have
need.
wanted, or for their family.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like I said, I would never take away from them. They were great parents. They were present. They were engaged. I think they had differing levels of emotional availability
That's a great way to say that.
for generally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean when I say people have different capacities and abilities. And
I was
so
gonna ask you about
those
that.
are then going to be some of the factors that influence if you can even have these conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's important, people have to, to me, you always have to be realistic about the individual you're dealing with,
Yeah.
right? Like, we're around people enough that we generally have a good idea how they're going to respond to things, what they're going to
Mm-hmm.
do. So we cannot fool ourselves to think just because we feel ready or because we've grown or gotten information that they are in the same place as us. We cannot
Mm-hmm.
project that on them.
Right.
Honestly, many of our parents might just stay where they are because that's their capacity, or at least that's they're not willing to go to a higher capacity, even
Yes.
if you told them. Um, and so that could influence whether you'd actually
Mm-hmm.
have that conversation directly. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, like I'm a whole psychologist, I have these conversations with the people. I haven't directly had it with my mother.
Yes.
I
Right.
have, I have, I have plenty of thoughts, ideas, because if and when we ever have co- those conversations, I want her to be at a place where she could hear it, not from a critical standpoint,
Yeah.
as just observation as someone in that situation, while
Mm-hmm.
also respecting her and acknowledging that I believe she did the best she could. But people aren't always ready to hear what can
Right.
seem to be conflicting truths.
So this is interesting because one of the things, and you're already kind of answering, my second question is how do we know um, when we are, or we're getting to this next question of how do you know when we're ready to have these conversations? But what I want to point out is, it will be easy for someone to say, right, and I'm glad you made this point, that, hey, how can you talk to us? How can you guys both talk to us about having these conversations if y'all ain't had the conversations with your parents? This is a perfect point, is that every conversation should not be had because you have to consider some very important things you just said, right?
Come
Capacity,
on.
their availability, if they're able, because, as I imagine what can be triggered in a lot of parents is shame for things that
Yes.
they cannot
Yes.
change, cannot go back and redo, and we know they
Mhm.
already have a limited emotional capacity already as they've demonstrated with their experience with you. Why put that
Right.
burden on them to have them unravel even now more of
Right.
their experience with you? And this is not saying, hey, well, you don't get the chance, you don't, you're taking the decision from them by not sharing. I don't agree with that. I don't think you're taking the decision from them to decide what they feel is good for them or good for them to hear or what not to hear. But what I do know, as you've articulated, is that they left enough evidence that they've left enough evidence that have demonstrated they're not ready to have
Yes.
this conversation.
Right. And there could be lower level conversations
Okay. Mm-hmm.
that you put out as a feeler to give you an idea of their capacity to
Absolutely.
handle it. There's someone else close to me who's been having a number of conversations with one of their parents, and it's been really challenging, because it has triggered some feelings of shame or triggered thoughts of, oh, so you thought I was a bad parent? Like, I did the best that I could.
Mm-hmm.
I did everything. And it's like, I'm not saying that. Like, again, multiple things can be true at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And it's not so much a criticism as much as I want to express or share from my side how I experienced
Mm-hmm.
my childhood with you, because we were going through it at the same time but had very different
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes that sharing is coming from a place of either I want to understand or I want to connect, or as an adult. Because here's the thing. Let me
Yeah.
tell you this. Here's the thing I'm gonna tell you. Here's the thing that starts to bring up these conversations for you. When you become a parent and when you start listen, when you start
It's
understanding
a whole
things
new
differently,
world.
and that's what be messing us up. And I think sometimes it's when we get to that point that we start to feel a readiness or have those questions or a desire to have those conversations. Because see, now I'm not a child. Now I'm not looking at
Yeah.
things as if I were a child. Now I'm an adult, also in a parental
Mm.
role, and
Mm-hmm.
I have a more varied or a wider perspective
Yeah.
that I want to share with you and understand how that was like for you, right? And
Yes.
how that impacted me and who I am as a having kids will bring up the
Man.
if you never thought about it, dealt with it, you try to all right,
Mm-hmm.
have some kids. It's gonna bring up some stuff. It's gonna
It will. It will. I think so. My son is, 8, and me and Camila were having this conversation about the dynamics um, of just raising him. And actually, she's on right now. Hey, babe.
hey.
My lovely wife. You probably see. Look, he's probably a little younger in that picture. Um, but we were having a conversation. Not conversation. We always have conversations around the dynamics of how we were raised and how that impacts our marriage, our parenting. We joke a lot. We have, but we have some very serious conversations, and I think we have enough. We have enough emotional maturity to say to each other, "That's your side of the family," and it's a running joke, right? But
That's
it's
you,
true
boo.
because, like, right? It's like when I see my son, I'm like, man, he definitely got that from me. And so the question then comes like, how do I parent him now? Like, and that's to your point. It makes me start to think about, man, how do my parents parent me in this moment, and the way that they parented me. Is that the same value that I want to hold to, or do I want to choose a different value to parent from? And we've talked about this, like that we parent from our values, and sometimes we have values, right, that we haven't even necessarily critically thought about. We're just
Yes. Just
passing them
repeating.
on. We're just repeating
Just without much thought.
without much thought, and it's so unconscious, subconscious, if you will.
Right. Because we do what we know, right? If we don't have any other
We do what we
options,
know.
that's what we're gonna do, or else, some things are kind of trial and error.
Right.
um,
That didn't work.
but yeah, but if we had conversations with our parents, I believe in some ways we're gonna see
Mm-hmm.
similarity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're doing, even if there are some things that we have in our head that we're adamant we're not going to do like
Right.
them, or you want to be different, which is fine. I think all of us have that to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
It runs, but yeah, our parents are going to be huge influencers on that. I think we're, I hope what we're encouraging people in having this conversation is to at
Mm-hmm.
least be reflective.
Yes.
Before you speak, right? Before you want
Mm-hmm.
to get in your feelings and say some
Yeah.
things, stop and be reflective, and as best, not
Mm-hmm.
excusing, as best as you can, try to see the other person's perspective and within the context of what they were experiencing at that time.
Good.
Um,
So go ahead and answer this question. So you're already answering it, which I was going to ask is if we want to have these conversations with our parents, what are some helpful things we should do before we have this conversation? And one of you just already mentioned, which I think is reflect.
yes. These are okay because there's going to be feelings, there's going to be sensitivities, there's going to be vulnerabilities, which is probably the reason you want to have these conversations anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about what really is it that you want to say, right? What are you really trying to express and get across?
Mm-hmm.
That's important. That's going to influence how you say it, right? Because some of us have anger, for example, which is fine,
Mm.
right? We might have anger about some things, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to speak out of that anger or in that anger. I think because we do have some level of respect for our parents. And some of it might not, and
Right.
some
Right.
might not for a reason. But nonetheless, as someone who's older than
Nonetheless.
you, could, create you some level.
Hmm.
Um, and so what is it you want to say and how do you want to say it? Um, without vitriol or without, I don't want to say blame, because again, without it being so critical, think about coming from a perspective of understanding. Like I want to
Absolutely.
try to make sense of what was going on with you. What were the circumstances? Because there's probably things. Look, first of all, especially Black families, we can hold secrets, child. There's probably things that we don't
For
know about that
generations.
they will like take to the grave that would help give you a
Right.
little perspective on why did you make that decision? Why did you do that?
Yes.
But so wait, we're talking about things to consider. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a
No,
second. No, go
you
ahead.
have. So this is important because you just said one of the things. Now, obviously, not speaking from a place of vitriol. I think because our body tone really matters. I know one of the things I had clients share with me is, as they started to share their experience with their parent, they notice like this deep sighing, and
Yeah,
it immediately like shut them down
yeah.
from sharing, and they didn't want to push forward. They were just like forget about it, and they just walked away, right?
Hmm.
And so one of the and in those moments, right, it kind of reinforces some of the experience they've already had. Like, see, this is why I don't want to say anything because this is what I get. And the other person is like, I didn't say anything. It's like, you did. You said it. Well, my thing is, you said it with your body. Your
Well,
body said it
right.
all.
Listen, that is so. If and that was one of the things I was thinking about too. So if you have this conversation, right? Let's just
Mm-hmm.
say, because I'm going to go forward and we'll go back.
Right.
That's one of the things that is going to be so important. Managing and being aware of your body, how you're
That's good.
feeling, how you're responding, because that's going to take energy and effort. Um, because even me, like if I'm passionate about something, like I'm going to start to get loud. I'm going to start to get
Yes.
a little passionate, and it's
Right.
hard for me to
From
dial that
Jersey.
in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, exactly. It's not even necessarily anger. It is I am believing in what I'm saying, but
Right.
that can come across a
Mm-hmm.
certain way, right?
Yeah.
So managing, like really paying attention internally, what's going on, slowing down if need be, stopping, like, hold on, let me just
Mm-hmm.
take a second, gather my thoughts, right? Because a lot of the
Right.
emotion can your thoughts all over the place. But we kind of alluded to this, but definitely considering the other person's emotional availability for this conversation. Because, like I said,
Mm.
just because you're ready doesn't mean they're ready, and that does not mean you should unload that on them if
Mm-hmm.
they're not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that actually takes away their choice, right? Because they could
Wow.
have that could be a boundary for them. I don't
That's
want to have this
good.
conversation, or I'm not ready, and that's not respecting their boundary because you feel ready. You want to have it. No, you can't force
Mm-hmm.
anyone to have the conversation, nor can you force anyone to take accountability for something. We might desire that.
Wait a
We
minute.
might
Say
want.
wait a minute. Say that again. You can't
We
force
can't force
anybody to do what?
to take accountability. We can't.
Would you
That is theirs to
say
take.
would you say that's probably one of the reasons that these conversations shut down is because they
That,
add that as a goal
yeah,
to they as it as a
that
goal to
that
begin the conversation with that I'm going to
okay.
share it.
It
Go
can't
ahead.
be a goal. I don't say it can't be a goal. It may not need to be a high one, at least initially.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's what I mean. Managing your expectations going into
Mm-hmm.
in any conversation. Um, it's almost kind of like forgiveness, right? It's
Mm,
borderline those type of conversations
mm-hmm.
where people feel like they can't release forgiveness unless they get an apology, unless someone acknowledges they did something wrong.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
It's a very similar thing that may not happen, and being
Yes.
prepared for that. So the goal of that conversation may not be for them to take accountability. It could just be, I want to share with you my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, and for you to just listen.
Mm-hmm.
That could be it.
That you know. I think that is a great, and I want to make sure I'm missing anything here. I think that's a great first conversation is to say, hey, I want to share something with you. I don't even want to have you say anything. I want to share it with you. And then we can have a follow-up conversation about, which I think is good, what your experience might have been. I just want you to sit with what I have to say first.
Right.
Um,
And that gives
cause I,
them more agency in
there
if
you
they want
go.
to have further that discussion. Because
Mm-hmm.
they might not. And they might not ever. And that's the thing. Some of us might not ever have that type of closure, may not ever get those answers. Like, I promise you, I've lost family members that I'm like, now I ain't gonna never get that answer. Like they're like, y'all are leaving here with these secrets. And I'm like, well,
Uh-huh.
okay, gotta resolve that
Okay.
on my own.
Look, so let me ask you this. Why is it that the presumption is for a lot of people that if we have the answers that is going to be the and sometimes I would say that is the thing. Sometimes it is helpful in our recovery and our healing, but I
Right.
almost tend to see people on the side of I need to know the answer in order for me to heal. Like it's like I'm not going to heal until I hear an answer for whatever my question was to my parent
Hmm.
about some type of relationship dynamic that we have going on or some experience. It's like they're just waiting. Like we are literally giving them the key to
Yeah.
our healing process. Why do you feel like people like really sometimes need to have that answer in order to move forward?
Because as humans, we want to know everything. We want to understand and make sense. And
Yeah.
honestly, as you were saying that, what I kid you not, what came to my mind was thinking about as believers, right? We want to know
Mm.
all the answers. We want God to
Yeah.
tell us everything. And he's very clear. He's like, I ain't going to reveal everything to you. You know why? Because some
Yes.
things you're not ready to
Mm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Some things you don't have the capacity to understand. And I know
Mm-hmm.
this as your
Yes.
father. You know what I mean? So there are just some things in life we're just not going to know until we meet face to face. Um,
Yes.
that doesn't change our desire per se.
Mm-hmm.
What it should influence, though, is our ability to still move forward nonetheless. Right?
Yes.
Because that's like saying, I can't move forward, God, in my relationship with you unless you tell me this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, come. Okay. that's, that's going to be on you. You holding yourself up. You
That's
holding
gonna be on
yourself up.
you.
Right. So you could say that and you could feel that way. You could stand on that hill 10 toes down. But
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself is a choice. Your healing, your ability to move forward rests within you. Other
It
things
does.
outside of you can influence it, could help move it along,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it should be necessary
Mm-hmm.
because we may not ever get answers. And I'm like, so we just stop? We just stop growing? We just stop moving forward just because we didn't get that answer? Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
some of those answers died with those people. And
Yes.
we had no control over that. So I'm forever done? No. We have to learn how to move forward without it. Or sometimes it just it's a certain understanding of, you know what, perhaps they did the best that they knew how. You know what, perhaps that's all, or that's the best they could do. Or, you know what, that wasn't good for me. I didn't appreciate that. I wish it were different, but it wasn't. What I can do is make it different for my
Mm-hmm.
children. What I can do is treat people differently. What I can do is learn the skills that they didn't teach. There's still ways to move forward
Mm-hmm.
without being stuck waiting for someone else, because there are gonna be some people you gonna wait forever,
Yeah.
because there I'm t- I think we all know someone who has a story. There are just gonna be some people who they're not gonna take accountability. They're not gonna admit they were wrong. They're gonna blame
Mm-hmm.
everybody else. You
For
have to know who you're
sure.
dealing with. You got to know who you're dealing with, so you don't set your own self up for disappointment.
That part. is, and I find that what you just said is so accurate. That people are unfortunately sometimes set themselves up for disappointment because they are waiting for
Mm-hmm.
um, the answer. They are looking for, in a lot of ways, they're looking for like that redemption that ultimately that moment is going to redeem
Mm-hmm.
all of their experiences, and that puts you in the place of a of being the victim. And you are right, you are a victim in that situation, but taking um, on that as a sense, as an identity, like as a personhood, like victimhood is different than um, being the victim of a situation or feeling. Because I love Donald Miller's book. He has a book called Hero on a Mission, and he talks
Mm-hmm.
about essentially how the victim, how the four major roles in each story. There is the villain,
Mm-hmm.
um, who is the person who feels like they have no sense of agency. You have the villain who is can be personified as a person or a abstract reality thing that gets in the way of you getting to your goal. The
So
guide, the
like an
person that helps, right as an obstacle. Then you have the guide, the person who helps you get to where you need to go, and then the hero. And this reality that we're all heroes in our stories, and we have gods. But he says two of those roles that we play empower us, and two
mm-hmm.
of those disempower us. When we either play the villain or the victim, we are going to always be in a state of disempowerment. When we play the hero, the god, we are going to always be empowered. And I love that he broke down what the hero was, because some people, when they say hero, like, man, I'm not the hero of my own story. And he says we get our understanding of heroes is confused in that we think that heroes are absent of challenges, of struggles, of flaws. And what we see from even most of our heroes on TV, Marvel comics, is that they all have flaws.
Absolutely.
And so he said a hero is nothing more than a victim going through a transformation process.
Come
And I
on.
love the way that coin. I was like, man, that's such like a good statement, that a hero is nothing more than a victim going through a transformation process.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think I want to hear people tonight is that you even in this conversation that we're having, you have more agency than you think, even though you may have been severely impacted and may still hold some of that trauma. As you probably heard me recommend the book for that. The body keeps score. So
I recommend
um,
all.
all the time. So I know some of you are like, man, but I got some real world stuff that I'm still struggling with. Yes, I want to acknowledge that, but I also want to encourage you that um, you have agency. We give up, which is it's one of the first things that God gave us, which I love, and it's got us in trouble. But He gave
The
us the
free will.
ability to choose free will. You know it, right? So we get a chance to choose what story we want to live from, and I think that's really essential. So, all right,
Wait, let me say this. 'Cause it made me think of
yes,
something to piggyback on what you said. What I think at the bottom line desire behind a lot of these conversations is the validation. But the important point of that validation doesn't always have to
mm-hmm.
come from the other person. It can come from other areas. One, you can
mm,
validate yourself. When we suppress, when we
so good.
deny, when we ignore, we invalidate our feelings, which is why it's hard for them. That's why they won't go away. And that's why they
This
often
is
get
good.
stronger over time. Because we are invalidating them. We rationalize, we
Ooh,
make excuses, right? We're looking for that validation, thinking the other person has to give it to me. One, you can give it to yourself. Two,
I'm gonna send your
you
love
could
offering.
go, come on, you could go to therapy. They can give you the validation. Your kids can
Mm,
give you validation. in the sense that acknowledging that you're a good parent, a decent parent, that you're
Mm-hmm.
making different choices and they recognize that, that can be validating. Your partner can validate.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is someone acknowledging, wow, that happened to you. That was tough.
Wow.
Or I can see that was hard for you or challenging. That's it. But it does,
Yes.
that other person is not the only source of it. It can come from other places.
That can be the healing statement for a lot of people tonight. Because that, man,
It needs to start
that
with you.
part is it.
It needs to start with you. Acknowledge it happened. I saw it. I've experienced it.
Mm.
And I feel however about it. Fill in the blank. And you're allowed to
Yes.
have that feeling. That doesn't negate that your parents provided for you. That doesn't negate that they didn't take care of you. That doesn't mean they
Mm-hmm.
were a bad parent. This happened. I feel this way about it. Accept
Man.
it. That. Allow yourself to feel that and experience that truth. That way, you don't feel like you have to get it from that other person. It's nice if they do. If they
Mm-hmm.
do, thank God, great for you. Some of us, though, that
Mm-hmm.
will not ever be our reality. Honestly.
It will not be, because I think, to your point, because this is so good, I think waiting for that. And sometimes I will acknowledge for people that sometimes they don't even know that they're even waiting for that validation. They are wanting it and waiting for it, but don't. Sometimes you have the language to put it on that. What I'm waiting for is that person to actually acknowledge out of their own mouth that you did me dirty. Essentially, is that you is that is
Listen,
that you
when
dropped
I say
me?
there are some people I know I'll never get that acknowledgement from, probably
Yes,
Jesus will come
the,
back before that happens. Okay?
right. It's like
I had to let it
it's
go. I did. Oh, it was hard. I ain't want to. And they still doing stuff too?
oh
Let me tell
man,
you.
look,
That's the thing. That be the thing. And you still out here being
and you still
trash?
here, oh man, and I know you being trash because people tell me about the trash you be doing,
Yeah, the play you trash
and
for the internet streets. But yes. So that's how you know. That is how you
mm,
know you're gonna have to find it within yourself or somewhere else. It may not be them, child. It may
and I want to
not.
say this, and to your point, that validation that we could give ourselves, it is not a lesser quality of the validation that we would get from that person. It is the same quality. Because I think some people are going to hear like, oh, so I have to just settle for my own validation and not them actually saying something. No, that same release of tears that you need, that you're waiting for from the other person, is the same release you can get internally from acknowledge, and you just said, just acknowledging and validating that, man, my experience was real, regardless if they acknowledge it or not. It was real. I
Listen,
experienced it.
James, I could say, I don't see your shirt is blue all day. No, it's not, James. That shirt is green. Okay, I don't know what you talking about. That don't
Right.
change the fact that it's blue. Just because I don't
Mm.
acknowledge it, don't change the
Hmm.
reality or the truth of it. You just have to know it's blue.
That's the only thing. I gotta know it's blue. It's the only thing that's gonna matter. Um, so I had this conversation with a client recently, and I was sharing with them that around this conversation of having these conversations is that sometimes we got to realize that in order for a parent to acknowledge something about our experience with them, they would first have to acknowledge some things to themselves. And if they have built their sense of identity around those things, some of the things that you're asking them to acknowledge may very well cause a sense of identity crisis, because of the same aspects that you're asking them to acknowledge about their experience with you. I guarantee you it's probably happened in other relationships. So if I have to acknowledge my experience with you, that you felt like, man, you were neglected, you were not paid attention to, you did not listen or validate me, you did silent treated against me, you withheld affection, that would mean I would have to think about all the other intimate relationships, whether romantic or platonic, that I have done these same type of things, and I'll have to be like, crap, if I'm doing it with my son, with my daughter, and I've heard these same things from these other people, what does that mean about who I am as a person? And so sometimes, as we know, the ego's way of protecting us from these things, from our identity breaking down, is to just deny, to say, no, that's not it. I'm not going to acknowledge that. Because if I acknowledge that, I have to acknowledge a whole slew of other things that I'm not ready to, frankly, articulate right now or own up to.
I had a thought. Hold on. I got to find it again.
Go find it. Go find it. It's coming.
Wait, I know. Wait, you said they're not ready to.
And I was talking about the ego.
Yes. Gosh dog it. Okay. Forget it. It'll come back.
So, so I had this conversation, and they were, I think for them, it was a thing that gave them solace in part because they realized, and it was a dude, it was a dude and his dad, and he realized that was the case. And in this case, it was strange. He had, this empathy for his dad, because he realized a big part of even that so much of his persona, even before he was born, was just built off being that person. And he wasn't trying to cause an identity crisis for his dad.
I remember what it is, but go ahead.
But he realized that and so this is something Sade has said earlier. I posted our comment, that in highlighting even some of the positives of the positive upside of some of these characteristics that they also demonstrated, because as you said before, it wasn't. And Tony Robbins, I think, says this. He says, if we blame our parents for all the crap that they put us through, we also have to give them credit for the positive aspects about our character and our sense of, because he said for some people, the only reason that you have a sense of resiliency and perseverance is because your parents treated you like crap. Excuse me.
Right. Yeah, that don't come from no good. What are you resilient from?
What are you resilient from? Right. All right. So I'm going to stop talking and go back to that comment.
No. So yes, related to that, what I think is always important for people to remember, and I say this all the time, keep in mind, other people's feelings are not your responsibility. That doesn't mean be cruel or harsh. That does not mean, something someone had to remind me, because I'm definitely a straightforward, give you the truth. But she was like, make sure you sprinkle some love in that truth though, girl. Okay. Don't have too much more truth than love. So speaking in a way that is true to yourself and your feelings, but knowing however they react or respond is not your responsibility. How we react or respond is our choice, and there's various things that factor into that. But we don't have to try to, let me backtrack. I'm sorry, you upset, because keep in mind, sometimes when we're dealing with certain individuals, right, especially the ones that don't take accountability, especially those ones that like to blame other people, they can turn that around you. They can use emotional manipulation again to deflect, get that attention off of them to avoid that accountability. So be very mindful of that. That could happen, and how you would respond to that. Right? We don't have to take that bait. We don't have to get into it. We don't have to go, yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. You're going in circles. You're not getting anywhere. It's just knowing they may not respond well. That's okay. Allow them to process and have their feelings. You don't have to do anything with it.
Right.
You could stop, right? You could take the cue and stop, like, okay, do we need to take a break? Do we need to pick this up? But that doesn't mean you necessarily said or did something wrong just because someone didn't take it well. Always keep that in mind.
That's good. This is my last question for tonight, because I want to honor people's time. For people who parents divorced early, they remarried, and the new parent or the step parent, is one of those people where they are like, I, um, they were an add-on, that you were an add-on as a child, so it wasn't my responsibility. Because you have some parents who are like, hey, you weren't really my responsibility. What do you say to those those adults who had experiences with step parents who didn't see the need to really parent them? And for some reason, understand, like, put some caveats here. Sometimes the dynamics are parents divorce and the biological parents still have a good co-parenting relationship with you, so the step parents are not as active in some way. But for those parents where the biological parents, once they divorced, they had no contact with us, and you were raised with a one step parent and one biological parent, and the step parent is like, you were just an add on to the deal. Right. Stepchild. Mm-hmm. Yes. What do you say to those people with those experiences? If some of these same things apply, or are there any kind of unique scenarios?
Here's the thing I always tell people: our feelings are valid, right? But also, feelings aren't necessarily facts. So we could feel that we were treated a certain way. Does not necessarily mean that's an actual fact, right? And that's not to invalidate anyone's feelings.
Right.
Try to be open to multiple explanations, multiple perspectives. In the sense, there could be people sometimes can do things with good intentions, but it comes across very wrong. I'm erring on the positive side for a second, in the sense, perhaps a step parent was like, well, I didn't really want to interfere. I wanted to keep a boundary, recognize I'm not your real parent. So, I didn't want to get too overly involved. Or I didn't want your other parent of the same gender to feel I was overstepping. Or, there could be real reasons. We don't always know what's going on around us. We just see the result and have the impact. Sometimes people really just aren't great individuals or good at relationships, and that'll be obvious in other relationships they have.
Man, that's so good.
So observe, is it just a you and that person thing, or is that person like that with other people too?
With other people.
In different ways. So it may not be specific or unique to you. Yes, you were on the receiving end of it, but that's characteristic of that person. Not something there's not something in you or about you that was broken, faulty, that led them to react that way, treat you that way. It's something in them. So try to really evaluate where that issue might actually lie. Sometimes it's within one person. Sometimes it's just within the dynamic. There are dynamics that both of you guys are bringing to the table that are just rubbing up against each other. But again, as you get older, as you can consider different, and talk to your biological parent first. Like, hey, did you notice that? Before you go to that person, talk to your parent and say, what do you think? And what is there some, was there something going on I didn't know about? I just felt this way and I didn't know. I wanted to check in about that to see, am I off? Am I perceiving that? You could say it like that. So, yeah.
This is good. Man, this has been so very enlightening and insightful, and I appreciate you for coming on with me tonight, having this conversation.
Finally, be on with you. We've been having this conversation. We're finally
our first live conversation. It has, and it's just the first of many. Yes, but I'm glad that you came on with me, Dr. Cheyenne Williams. I got it right, Dre. So they'll be sending me no text after this recording.
Let's do it. It's official.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes. But man, we appreciate you guys for joining with us tonight. Like I said, even if you're listening to this by replay, let me know where you're chiming in from. And if you have questions, you can drop them below. If we get enough questions, I can have a separate broadcast where we actually do a follow up and answer some specific questions related to tonight's conversation. And then again, all of the previous parts of this series, Family Ish, are on YouTube, and they're on Facebook as well. But YouTube, so you can catch all 3 parts, including this one. It'll be up on tonight. And at James Perkins TV. So if you were on tonight on Facebook and you want to go over to YouTube, just type in James Perkins TV and my channel will come up. Make sure you hit the subscribe link and the icon for notifications. That way you'll get notified when we go live each week. All right, friends, it's been great. Until next week, you guys be well. Take care.